Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Go-to-Market and Sales Mentors APAC. Today, I have Dan Shaw joining me for the episode. Dan, thanks for coming on.
No problem. Thanks for having me, John.
So today I wanted to talk about sales leadership as a career trajectory. Somebody that has had a lot of early success as a sales leader, and your trajectory has been really unique. You became a sales leader early in your tech career, APAC sales leader positions with LogMeIn, and then joined WalkMe at that point, as we know, hypergrowth Series D or E firm at that point had raised close to $100 million. So a really significant role that you'd got into it. If you don't mind me saying, a relatively very young age for a sales leader. You're now regional vice president at Smartsheet. What would I need to know about your foundations that led you to this quite rapid ascent in tech sales leadership?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks for the intro. I think for me, foundationally, I became really comfortable doing things that were uncomfortable early on. And I'll expand on what I mean by that. I started my real sales career out in recruitment, like a lot of Brits do, moving over to Australia. I think doing a quote unquote hard job initially really sets you up for success in terms of work ethic and honestly grit. A lot of the salespeople that I hire now into my sales teams are people that have done door-to-door sales or recruitment or, probably what I would call non-traditional tech backgrounds. We've had an amazing 10-year run over the last 10 years in tech. And I think sometimes people can take for granted just how good that's been. So having that different flavor, and it can be anything from they played high-level sport and they kind of have to overcome the challenges there through to really grinded out type roles to begin with, just sets that level foundation to begin with.
And prior to recruitment, can you tell me about what you were like as a kid? What was your upbringing like that led you to become a leader in your profession?
Yeah, I think I don't think anyone grows up as a kid saying they want to be in sales necessarily. I'm sure there'll be one or two people out there listening that did, but I think for the majority, it's something that finds you rather than you finding it. For me, really, when I was younger, all I knew is that I wanted to make as much money as possible and have a great life outside of work, along with really enjoying what I do from a work perspective. From a young age, I actually did a pharmacy degree, so my background is in medicine, but didn't want to pursue that. I felt like that was a bit too long of a journey through education, and just kind of wanted to get going. And really found business interesting, found stocks interesting, the mechanics of how organizations work, and that kind of just led me down a path to. I graduated uni just after the GFC in the UK. There wasn't a lot of jobs around, so I actually ended up just getting whatever job I could, which was a job selling food packaging in Scotland. So vacuum packaging for meat and stuff. So that was my first introduction to kind of hardcore grind it out style sales. It was door knocking around industrial parks and that sort of stuff.
And then recruitment, which you mentioned, of course, gave you some early resilience. Can you talk about what recruitment's done in terms of leading you into your sales career?
Sure. I think going into recruitment, once you've got a lot of experience, would be difficult. I think going into recruitment with a lot of SaaS experience would be difficult. I think going into recruitment as a first kind of benchmarking role is really good. I was told that I just had to make 100 calls a day. There was times where you weren't allowed to leave your desk. It was just get on with it and get on the phone. And while I think that from a leadership style perspective, that's a little bit archaic, and it's not necessarily how I model myself as a leader. What it did do was give me the perspective so that when times got tough in the future, I had that layer of resilience of, I've had it tough in the past and I got through that and I was successful in that as well. And those around me at that point, you're kind of all in it together. And you see people that succeed are the ones that just kind of get on with the job and make it work for them. So I think having that benchmark of a high work ethic in kind of no frills environment where it's just pick up the phone and get on with it, really just kind of set up that kind of mindset around how to go about your job.
You've hired sales leaders who come originally from a recruitment background. You have yourself, you've seen it being really successful. What do you think stops some organizations from hiring people straight out of recruitment into software sales roles? What's the, some businesses do it right, but I think there's the element of they feel risk in terms of the ramp. What are your thoughts on that?
I think your perspective as a hiring manager changes over time. I think there's a natural gravitation towards hiring people that you understand and can understand their journey when you begin in that line. So what I would say is now I hire people from all sorts of backgrounds. It's not just the background that I had, but early doors, it's quite easy to identify what's made you successful in a role and then to look for similar attributes in people. I would clarify there, not looking for similar people, but looking for people that have got similar attributes in terms of that work ethic. It can be a disaster if you just try and hire people like yourself. So initially, when I first started hiring people up, my first kind of probably 20, 30 hires were people that fit a profile that I knew could be successful because it was mine and it was also one that I'd seen other people be successful through. As you gain more experience, you can kind of peel back the layers on that and understand that maybe it's not an experience set that makes people successful. Maybe it's a mindset. And actually, regardless of their background, you either have that mindset or you don't have that mindset. But I think for younger leaders or leaders that are earlier in their, I've been doing this now for more than a decade, but leaders earlier in their leadership career, if they've only gone through tech, right? If they started off on the traditional tech route, SDR or BDR, moved into a rep role, moved into a leadership role, they're probably going to be a little bit blinkered to that because that's the success that they've known. So they're going to look for that in candidates. I would encourage people to kind of take those blinkers off and drill down into what background set them up for success, but actually what attributes that background gave them that set them up for success, and then go and look for those.
Got it. So you don't know what you don't know to an extent.
Yeah.
Let's dig into that then. So the characteristics of your ideal salesperson in the team now and when you first started. Can you talk through those characteristics and how it might have evolved?
Yeah, sure. I think, and I think we're going to talk about this in a minute in the leadership stuff. Characteristics of a really good sales rep and a really good sales leader are really different. And some people have both and some people don't, right? They either have one or the other. I think at a rep level, it's not overcomplicated. It's a combination of natural talent. People say that people are a natural born salesperson, and I do believe that there's a group of people that fit that profile. But really, when you boil that down, what that comes down to is a combination of a high work ethic and really the ability to be a clear communicator and conceptualize ideas and be able to communicate them back in a really clear way. I think some of the least effective salespeople I've seen are the ones that tend to waffle and take a long time to get a point across, in which case the point is lost. Being able to communicate really clearly, make a point, and then be comfortable just leaving that out there and waiting for a response is a really powerful personality trait that the best reps are all able to do.
So that's a talent. You feel that's not something that could be taught?
I think you can probably learn it. I think it's an uphill battle if you don't naturally have that ability. But I think the best people that I've seen be successful right out the gate without a ton of coaching are the ones that you can kind of throw a question or a sentence at that might be quite abstract or a business problem at, and they can then internalize that and communicate it back in a really effective but really succinct way. And then having a high level of commercial acumen as well to go along with that. And that's something that you can learn. No one goes into their first job being able to speak like a C-level exec, but putting yourself in positions where you're exposed to those people and you're in the room with those people will ramp that ability up really, really quickly.
I remember going to grad interviews myself and being programs. I think one of the top men in the Adidas graduate program that I was interviewing for, and the assessment center that you would go to very much try to evaluate what you said, what were your decision making and your problem solving, your communication skills. And they had a day basically where you go through, you've done yourself various tasks in a group to understand who is the best at that. Fairly traditional route for ratings for commercial jobs. What have you found in terms of assessing for these characteristic traits in the way that you interview and look for people?
Yeah, I think, and again, this is your own personal interview style changes over your career, right? I wouldn't be surprised if I've done more than 1,000 interviews over the last 10 years. I've got 9 this week, for example. So it's something that you're constantly honing and working on. I found that the broader you can ask a question, the better you can get a feel for how succinct someone can be. Right. So I normally start most of my interviews with, give me your highlight reel of your background, right? I've got your CV. I don't want to hear job by job. What I want to hear is good roles, good leaders, bad leaders. Basically, what's the journey been to get you here today? And most of the interviews at a rep level that they have with me, it's a 30-minute interview. It's not a long time. And some of them will ramble on for 15 minutes, reading out their CV line by line. And what that tells me is you can't conceptualize the question that I'm trying to ask. And then you can't verbalize the answer in a way that's succinct and to the point. And then other people will come straight back and go, I had a really interesting role here, and this is why, and this is what it taught me about myself. They'll go into their successes, their failures, and ultimately paint a picture of their broad experience that culminates in the point where we are today and why we're talking today and why this role is the right role for them. And then similarly, I'll ask reps, tell me about your best deal. It doesn't have to be your biggest deal. Tell me about your best one and how they think about the best deal that they've ever done in terms of, was it just because it was the biggest price? Some people tell me it was their best deal because it was the easiest one. And then other people will go into the challenges that the business faced, the value that they were able to present to the customer, and then the outcome that they were able to drive off the back of it. And I know at that point, well, if I put you in front of a customer now, that's how you're going to conduct that meeting. So I think asking quite broad questions, but it's less about what the actual answer is and more about how that answer is structured and communicated.
Because this goes back to how they'd be in a real life situation. So they're trying to work out what problem does Dan have and how do I solve it by showing the essence of what I'm about and what I've done.
100%. And I think people that can communicate in that way also handle pressure much better, because it's really the same process, right? When you get pressure in your role, which we all do in what we do, the ability to kind of internalize that, understand why and how and what you can do about it, and then communicate a plan. That's essentially the way to deal with it.
Are you looking for candidates to qualify you in the interview?
I think it depends on the role. I hire for a real broad spectrum of roles, and obviously I get pulled into a lot of cross-functional hiring as well. So it really depends on the role, but I always like to be close. I don't necessarily want to give out my interview playbook because if anyone watches this and they have an interview with me, I'm going to give it to how to pass. I have to change my tactics, but look, I like someone to, if I get to the point where I let people ask questions and find out more about the role, and their questions are really generic and high level, it kind of tells me you're just looking for any job. Whereas when the questions are around, for at the moment with Smartsheet, why Smartsheet, and they've done some research and they understand the problems that we solve, and they've got a point of view as to why they think it would be a good role for them, and they want to dig into that more. Again, it just all leads back to their ability to think clearly and communicate clearly.
Let's switch pace and talk more about the leadership trajectory. Again, I want to go back to that example of WalkMe, where we met originally, Dan. So at that point, really fast growth, upscale business, as I mentioned, really impact role. You're in there with probably a lot of execs. They're much older than you. They've already been leading for a number of years before. Was it daunting being put in such a big role at a young age?
I think that's a fair question. I feel like by the time I moved into that role, I was really ready for it. I think that if I took a step back, my first role at Citrix and LogMeIn that was more daunting. When I reflect on those moments, I think you can get paralyzed by the volume of things to do, particularly when I stepped into WalkMe, right? It was a really, really young region here. There was a few people on the ground, but really it hadn't been grown out. So we had to do everything from find an office space to build a go-to-market plan to hire a bunch of people right off the gate. It was a really broad role because everything needed to be set up. There was no structure, no way of doing things. So yeah, it really was grassroots. And I think it would have been quite easy to get overwhelmed in that moment. But what I'd done as part of my preparation for moving into that organization was to think about all the things that needed to be done. And I guide my leaders that report to me today on doing this exact same thing, which is to separate things that are urgent from things that are important, because there's some things that are really important but not urgent, right? And they're things that you can kind of put away for now and get to later on. There are things that are really urgent that aren't important at all, and they're the things you should delegate and have other people do. There are things that are neither urgent or important. They just need to be gone altogether, right? And you never get to those. It's never going to happen. And then that leaves you with the things that are both urgent and important. And that gives you a really good prioritization stack rank. So you can go, okay, well, what's the most important thing? And for us at that point, it was about clearly defining how we were going to go to market and how we were going to start speaking to customers about our value proposition. So we started there and we just went, okay, well, let's start there. One of the other things that I felt was really urgent and really important was setting a standard for the culture of what we were going to have locally in ANZ, getting the group that we had together and all the new hires and bringing them along onto a shared vision about what we were going to achieve as an organization. And to my understanding, that the vision that we set out is still up on a poster above the bar in the Walby office. So I picked a couple of those things and really drilled down into a plan on how we were going to get some quick wins in those areas. And then as time goes on, new things surface, which are either important or urgent or both. And you kind of prioritize them accordingly. And you just have that as your North Star going forwards. That never needs to change. And I think that takes a lot of anxiety out of moving into that role for the first time. It's like, well, I know that I can't do everything. And I also know that I'm not going to know everything, right? Being okay, being comfortable in the uncomfortable is really important. And being willing to go to other people and say, I actually have no idea how to do this. This is what my gut tells me. And one of the leadership traits that I think, yeah, it was either Andy Jassy or Jeff Bezos himself. One of the core leadership traits at AWS is that leaders are usually right. And the reason I think that is true is because leaders generally have a good gut sense for things. So when you have a problem, and this is a big kind of divider between a rep and a leader, or an individual contributor and a leader, is the ability to go, there's a problem here. I don't know the answer to the problem, but here's a gut feel that I have, or here's a thread for us to go and start pulling on to kind of try and figure that out. Versus, here's a problem, I don't know what to do about it, so I'm just going to go ask my manager, because that's not always available in regional roles, right?
Yeah, because my perception is outside looking in that's the biggest gap for somebody going into leadership. They might be great at sales, great with customers, but the internal selling, you might call it, managing expectations from the top down, and being able to have those conversations, relay that, you know what you're doing, but get the help when you need it. Takes a level of EQ, IQ, and experience to do it. Do you think that's one of the biggest gaps, that call it internal selling, managing expectations?
Yeah, I definitely think that's a big gap. I'd probably phrase it slightly differently. You kind of put it as the ability to communicate and to manage those stakeholders. When you're in a local role with local leadership, that's really important. But actually, when you move into a regional role and you're reporting overseas, if you've got good leaders above you, generally they're looking to you to say, we're not going to tell you what to do and you don't need to manage us. You're going to tell us what to do. And you're the expert in the region. And it's actually the ability to manage downwards into the business and help people understand that a lot of times people are trying to flag issues that are actually symptoms rather than problems. And I can give you an example of that, right? Someone might be struggling with lead flow and they might put their hand up and say, hey, we're not getting enough leads, right? We're just not getting enough inbound leads. That's a symptom of a different problem. A leader will go, okay, well, I saw that our lead volumes were down. What I did about that was to go kind of down funnel a little bit. Looked around in a few places, kind of, my gut instinct was to go and look here, that was wrong. And then, we found out that actually one of our campaigns has been leading routes to the total wrong place, routing leads to the total wrong place, and they haven't been landing in our inbox, and that's why we've got no leads. Here's my solution for that, right? And really, the ability to move past a symptom, which is what you see at the business, into a problem, and then be able to communicate the plan to fix that problem is more important. And that's up and down. Right? Because when you're doing that up, you can put a really clear picture of this is what I need to get a problem solved, rather than just saying, here's a problem, how do I solve it? And then down, it gives people confidence that you actually know what's going on and you have an ability to fix that for them, right? If you just kind of go, yeah, we've got no leads and I don't know why, and what do you think? And I'm going to go and ask my manager and they're going to say, I don't know. And we're all just going to kind of spin around and around here. People quickly lose faith that you don't actually know how to set a direction for a business and get problems solved.
Makes a lot of sense. It sounds like you've got to have some confidence or gut feel to go in there and make those kind of decisions. I draw a parallel. I use sports analogies quite a lot, but thinking back to football, players that I played with at professional level, but sometimes people ask me, what was the difference between the players that have gone on to play international football and made a career in it? And I think it's really the ones that got a shot on their debut just did really well, and it was as if they were meant to be there, right? They didn't overthink it. I used to overthink it, issue that they just got their debut and it was like, yeah, meant to be I'm a bit out of my depth, but I'm just going to get sticking out of line there. And then their trajectory just goes rapid from there. It kind of sounds like it's the same in the commercial world with tech sales, tech leadership.
I think it's the exact same. Like, really what you're describing there is the high pressure scenario, right? You've got your first debut, you've got the ability to go, you're a first time leader, or you're interviewing for a leadership role, or you want to display leadership characteristics. Like, it's a pressure moment. And there's a I think there's a human need to appear like you have all the answers, right? Particularly if you're interviewing or if you're a first-time lead, and this is a mistake I see a lot of first-time leaders make. They think that they have to have the answer for everything. I think one of the things, to your point, that's really powerful is being able to to be able to be totally comfortable in saying to someone, I actually don't know the answer to that. This is what my gut tells me, but I'm going to go and find out. And be okay not knowing and be okay making mistakes. Like, it's fine to get things wrong. What's not fine is to get them wrong and then make it someone else's problem. Right? And I think that's what good sports people do, right? Not every pass is going to be brilliant. You're not going to score every goal, but it's your ability to miss the goal, turn around and go, okay, like this is kind of where we misstepped that. Here's a better for next time, but let's just keep going at it, right? I'm not going to give up because I missed the goal once. I'm going to keep going.
Absolutely, you're meant to be. So what advice do you have for reps that are looking to forge a career in sales leadership? What's the first step they should be taking?
Yeah, and I think transparently, the first step is the hardest. Going from that first time IC role into a first time leader role, you need a combination of things to get there. I think and some of it you can control and some of it you can't control, to be transparent. The things that you can control is having a problem-solving mindset, right, which we already spoke about. So being able to recognize pinch points in the business and solve them. The reason I got into my first leadership role when I was at Citrix, and you called out that it was relatively new into my SaaS sales career, was because we were doing a ton of business in ANZ for Citrix Online, which is GoToMeeting and ShareFile and LastPass and a few other products. We were doing a lot of business in ANZ. Our team was APAC, but we were doing almost nothing in Southeast Asia. So I saw that as an opportunity. I didn't wait for someone to come and ask me about that. I was an SMB rep at the time in ANZ, but I went up to my VP and I put my hand up and I said, hey, there's a big opportunity for us over here. It's going to be really difficult to capitalize on it. I'm the guy that wants to take that on. Send me up to Singapore for 5 weeks and let me see what pipeline I can be. And this is before I had kids and all, a lot of responsibility at home. But so I did. I put together a compelling business case and I said, these are the goals that I think I can achieve, and this is the outcome that I think I can drive. I was very outcome focused. He sent me up to Asia for 5 weeks. I went up to Singapore for 5 weeks, built a ton of pipeline, closed a ton of business. And then when I came back, we just started our planning cycle for next year. And his point of view was, well, you proved out the business case, you proved out that you're the guy for it. I'm going to give you a manager role. And that's what kind of leads me into the second part, which is a little bit out of your control. You also need someone who believes in you. And you can help someone along on that journey, right? By doing all the things that we've spoken about today, by being outcomes focused and all that sort of stuff. But you do need someone that can give you that break. I had a VP at the time who believed in me and understood what I was trying to communicate and gave me the opportunity, because until you're doing it, you are unproven. Like I said earlier on, it's a very different skill set. And the best reps don't always make the best managers, and the best managers wouldn't always be the best reps. But he gave me that opportunity. He took a bit of a punt on me, and then I threw myself into it fully and made sure that it was successful, because then it was back in my control. And then if I look at, I've got 5 leaders that are reporting to me now, 3 managers and 2 directors. Out of those 5 leaders, 3 of them I promoted into first-time leadership roles. They were reps that I've moved up because I want to be able to give people that opportunity as well. So I think finding someone that's bought into you as a person and your ability, but then also being willing to demonstrate that. Go and take on the hard challenge. And I've done that consistently through my career, right? When I moved to WalkMe, that was a challenging role comparative to the business that I've built up for the 3 or 4 years at LogMeIn prior. Similarly with Smartsheet, when I joined this organization, I took a step back from a VP role into a senior manager role because we needed to build an enterprise go-to-market plan, and I could see what was going to be down the line. Putting your hand up for those big challenges generally pay off really well if you can overcome them in the long run. So I kind of said a lot there, but hopefully that makes sense.
Absolutely, yeah. And high pressure, and the result of that, if you get it right and you use your gut and you've got a good person that's going to give you a shot, the learning curve is just massively, it's way more aggressive basically if you do it that way.
It is. If you've taken a big challenge, people recognize that, right? So when I put my hand up to taking that Asia role, the first thing that VP said to me was like, why would you do this, right? You're smashing your number in your current role. Why would you go? This is way harder. But the answer is because I don't kind of think that's how you earn the right to move into that first leadership role. Like, you've got to, when you're moving into a management role, you're competing against everyone who already has experience and is already proven in that space. So you've got to find a way to differentiate yourself from those people. And that is by being the person that will take on the hardest job. I spend most of my time now looking for the hardest problems in our business and how I can solve them or how I can help other people solve them. Because really they're the things they're our major roadblocks that are stopping us from growing and succeeding down the line.
Right. So on your player profile, we talked about, then it's somebody that can be very succinct with a message, communicate an idea. It sounds like having an appetite to do hard things is something that's on there as well. Is that to me you're looking for?
Absolutely. Yeah, go and find them, right? Because if they're hard for you, they're probably hard for your manager and they're probably hard for your VP. Also listen to what people care about. I think a lot of the time people are so focused on problems that aren't really problems, point in time things, obstacles that get put in front of them on an individual deal by deal basis. Like they're not the problems that you're solving at a leadership level. If I'm obviously there to coach and help with deals, and I still get involved really regularly in our large transactions that we do. But my point of view is that my job now is to, the people that I want to promote are the people that are coming and saying, hey, I'll take care of my number, don't worry about that. But I've also seen a huge opportunity for us over here. How should we think about that? And let's go after that. I've got an idea. Let me go and run with it. And it's a no-brainer from there, right? So they're essentially doing part of my job for me.
Do you think that macro lens that you take comes from an early interest in the stock market, for instance?
I definitely think that helps. I think if you're in a sales role at any level, and leadership or otherwise, and you have to communicate with people at a C level, which most salespeople, that's what they're trying to do, right? They're trying to get to C level because that's where they'll sell. You end up selling to who you sound like. And that's a really cliched sales phrase, but it rings true. If you sound like a mid-level manager and you're talking about mid-level manager problems, that's where you're going to get to in your deals. And that's how you're going to sound internally. If you understand the more macro environment, you understand what pushes and pulls the market, then ultimately you end up speaking to those people inside of your organizations. I mean, one of the things that I'm usually bought into in deals now is to try and make an executive connection, make an executive bridge. We're mid-level in an organization and people want me to reach out to try and elevate that conversation. If I didn't understand broader context of how businesses run, both inside our industry, but outside of it in the customers' industries as well, then I'd never be able to get to that level. And I think that is really important. If I think we've got I won't obviously mention names, but we've got a particular rep that stands out to me in one of my sales teams now. And he's the first one to pull apart earnings calls. He's the first one to message and it's selfless, right? He messages the whole team to say, hey, here's some really interesting things. He messages people about their own accounts that aren't even his to say, hey, I was listening to this, this podcast and this came up and I thought it'd be really interesting and it really relates to a problem we solve. You should reach out. So yeah, I think I wouldn't necessarily say it's the be all and end all. I work with a lot of leaders that don't have a lot of commercial acumen more broadly, but I think in terms of that trajectory, it's a massive helper if you can be interested and involved in macro events.
And it's becoming much more of a, viable opportunity for reps to do that now with the sales tools that are available to break down quality calls, and you get it in your inbox every day. It's not the same as you going and reading a newspaper 10 years ago, right?
There's no excuse for it now. I mean, with generative AI, if you're turning up to a sales call with a customer or a deal review call with a leader, and you don't know what was spoken about from a C-level on their last earnings call, top 3-4 priorities, you can't blame anyone but yourself when you're not winning that deal, right? Because in this economy, companies are only solving problems that are real needle movers, right? The nice to haves have gone away. People aren't buying a piece of software today because it looks cool or it might solve a niche problem, but they're buying software today because it solves a mission critical problem for them. And if you don't understand what those mission critical problems are, you're just going to end up wasting your time at a mid-level trying to solve one mid-level manager problem that they're never realistically going to spend a couple of $100K on.
Final couple of questions, Dan. And the question I was going to ask you is why leadership? It sounds like, if I would take a swing, it sounds like maybe one of the reasons you're in leadership is impact and the opportunity to have a bigger impact. Is that fair, or is there, another call in for leadership here?
No, I think that's fair. I think a lot of people think the answer to the question when I ask them, why do you want to be in a leadership role, should be that I want to see people learn and grow, right? Mm. That's certainly a rewarding part of the job when you get to see people be successful and grow their careers. And like I said, I try and find those opportunities to move people into leadership roles and all that sort of stuff. That's not the main part of the job, unfortunately, right? That's a school teacher's job, really. And I get that it's rewarding, but that's not really the answer. I think for me, the reason, and it's a deeply personal thing for each person, so there isn't a one size fits all, but you're right. I think impact is a big one. I also just find the problems that you get to solve at a leadership level really interesting. Like they're really interesting problems, like how to enter a new market, how to structure an organization for success, where to invest. Like right now, every organization is trying to trim down expenses and increase profit margins. So internally, what do I do with resources? How do I manage them? Where should we place some bets and where shouldn't we? What's our expected return on it? They're interesting problems. Then the ability to take a long-term view kind of ties into that macroeconomic stuff. I don't spend a ton of my time sweating this month or even this quarter. It's more about, okay, well, where are we at in the year? What's working? What's not working? How do we go 1, 3, 5 years out from there and set the business up in a scalable way? End of financial year is Jan 31st, and we're just starting our planning for next year and how we're going to structure that. So having a long-term lens on things, I think, is quite rewarding. Kind of move, you can get very burnt out if you're in that month, quarter-to-quarter cycle, which people get stuck in. And then finally, I think there's a skill set alignment. And like I said earlier on, I actually don't think that I would make the best rep. I think I'm effective in the role that I do, and it aligns to my skill set and my interests. But there's other people out there that it doesn't align to your skill set, right? If you're a lone wolf operator and you just want to control, like I have no control over my own calendar, over my own life. I'm at the beck and call of the people that need me. If you prefer to just kind of crack on and do your thing and get your head down, and you want to make $1 million fast, being a rep's probably the best way to do that. An enterprise rep is probably the fastest route to that path. That's not my skill set. But if that is your skill set and you want to get into leadership, it's going to be an uphill battle for you. So just kind of doing a self-assessment about where your skills lie and then lining up your career behind that and having a plan for yourself rather than just kind of sitting there waiting for something to happen to you.
Yeah, but it's really good advice as well. I think the headline there, which would be pertinent one, I don't think so many people think about this way, but if you're thinking about checklists to be in leadership, it should perhaps be more about becoming a business leader and not people leader. Yeah.
I'm not necessarily just a sales leader. My role is really cross-functional. I'm in the office tomorrow doing a presentation to a bunch of our partner group. I get involved in RSCs, our customer success, renewals, marketing strategy, even our professional services rollout. I'm heavily involved there as well. HR issues, legal issues. The list never ends. When you move particularly into a second line role, you're not a deal maker and you're not necessarily a manager anymore. You're a business advisor across the group.
Last question for you, Dan. It's a topical one. I want to get your thoughts on it. A lot of leaders are looking for work at the minute. It's a really rough market, rate of time out there for plenty of sales leaders in tech. Because of the market conditions, I'm getting a lot of questions as to should I go back into a rep role and what's the perception in getting the leadership role after that from the CRO, VP Sales that would want to hire me? Is it going to have a poor effect on my trajectory?
I think that's a good question. And I know there's a lot of people in this position at the moment. I think the honest answer is why. Why go and do it? So if I was interviewing a leader that had done that and I asked them why they went and did that, and their answer was pretty honestly, it's a tough market. I've got that skill set. I needed to pay the bills, but my true passion is leadership. And, the market ebbs and flows, or sometimes it's great and sometimes it's not, but this is a great opportunity and it's more aligned to what I want to do. Then I think that's okay, right? Ultimately, I think people sometimes take work a little bit too seriously. It's not your whole self, right? You have a life outside of work. You have bills to pay. You have a family to feed. No one should be ashamed or feel embarrassed or feel like they're going backwards to put food on the table at home, right? So I kind of want to put that out there first and foremost. However, if the answer is because if they did a really short-term leadership stint and it didn't work out, right? Or if we're talking through interview questions and it's clear that to my point earlier on, skill set is more aligned to deal making and solving customer problems rather than internal challenges. If people want to take the easy road instead of the hard kind of path less trodden, then that for me signals that they probably had a foray into leadership, because a lot of people get into leadership because they just think that that's the next step, right? It's I'll maybe move myself up segments and now I'm an enterprise rep. What next? I don't know. I'll be a leader. And it hasn't worked out. And I've seen a lot of examples of that. Those people should just go and continue to hone their craft, which is being a really excellent executor, and go and be successful doing that. So I really think it depends on the reason as to why. If we were in a really buoyant market and people were moving back into first like IC roles, and it's more of a question mark. But today, like I said, I hire people with really varied backgrounds. As a first line manager, you still need to be very in the trenches with your people and helping get deals across the line. So, I think do what you need to do, but stay true to what you want to do. Like again, going back to having that long-term plan for yourself. Like the path isn't linear. Right? I moved from a VP role into a senior manager role to join Smartsheet, and I'm now back into a VP role. But the path is find an opportunity, take the opportunity. Don't worry about the title. To an extent, don't worry about the pay if the opportunity's there.
Yeah.
And the rest kind of just works itself out as long as you have those mindset things around solving big problems and being an effective communicator.
Great advice. Yeah, I think you're right. I think it harks back to your earlier comment as well. You need to earn it. So the talk track rings really true if you're genuine and you've earned, a stint where you're going to go back into an A role because you've got to pay the bills. I think that story is a good one. It's more if you've tried it and it didn't quite work out, you're going back to A, but I think it's going to be difficult to then try and get a VP or sales leader role the second time around.
Yeah.
Dan, you've been a fantastic guest. So many sound bites and things we can take from that for people in sales and sales leadership. So thank you for being so generous with your time and your experience.
No problem. Thanks for having me. Really enjoyed it.